So, hi there. Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Amber Show. Just in case you didn't know, you're now a guest on The Amber Show. So, we have a very special guest here with us today. So maybe you can start with an introduction.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Amber. So my name is Kai Huang. I consider myself a serial entrepreneur. I've started 5 companies now, all in pretty different areas. But most of my career has been spent in games. Most of my working career has been spent working in gaming. Started a company with my brother called RedOctane, which, like most startups, we pivoted 3 times. We went from online video game rentals to doing video game accessories to ultimately becoming a publisher, which is where we had the most success. We published a game called Guitar Hero, which became really, really popular through most of the world. And the company was acquired by Activision in 2006. I stayed till 2010. My brother and I both stayed till 2010. We were on employment contracts, so we stayed with the company for a little bit longer. And as entrepreneurs at heart, ultimately we decided we wanted to get back to our entrepreneurial roots. So we left in 2010, and since then I've started 3 other companies, including one that's in health and fitness, but more around trying to make it more fun. I've done a smart electric bike company, which is totally different from anything I've done in the past. And now I'm working on 886 Studios, which is a venture studio here in Taiwan.
Well, I'm sure we're going to get to all of that, but let's start from the very beginning, and especially why I'm super excited to have you here. So let's start with my story. So I was really into rock and roll, and I'm really happy. I'm hoping today, if anything, we start to talk about music instead of startups or whatnot. Let's talk about the music, right?
Yeah.
So when I was young, I had 10 guitars, and I never really was able to play any of them well. And a friend of mine was like, you know what, Amber, just give up. Here's this Guitar Hero game for you. Now we can all be our envisioned
the rock star that we always thought we could be.
Exactly. So, that's where the inspiration came. So I'm just wondering, I'm sure a lot of people kind of felt that way also. Did you always want to be a rock star? Or?
I had no ambitions to be a rock star, actually. Although it was a lot of fun working on the game and working with the music industry. They're all crazy, but it was still fun working in that industry and with games. And it was just a lot of fun to people are so connected with music. It was just a lot of fun to work in a space where it was something people were very passionate about.
Yeah, maybe you could share some stories with us. There were so many amazing songs that I never get to sing at karaoke, and amazing timeless riffs. I'm a huge Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Queens of the Stone Age fan, or you had Aerosmith. Maybe can you share some of these stories with us? How you were able to access, and did you get to meet these people? What are some amazing stories?
Yeah, we were very lucky. We had a chance to meet, I would say probably a third of the artists that we worked with in the game. It was, from the beginning, it was actually a very difficult process. So music licensing is a super, super difficult process. And anybody who's tried to do that, particularly, back in those days, it was just very hard to work with the labels to license music. So for the first version of the game, Guitar Hero 1, we actually didn't use any original music, no masters. We actually licensed the music and then re-recorded all of them. And it was a couple of reasons. One is it was hard to afford all that music. So, we were still a young startup back then, and paying for all that music was much more expensive. But really, number 2 is the artists themselves didn't want to work with us because we were a new game. They had no idea if it was going to be good or bad. So most artists had to give us approval rights, and they would not.
But can you clarify? You didn't get their approval, but you were able to re-record their music with other singers and that.
That is correct. So there's what they call the masters, and that's usually the one that the most famous singers sing, like Aerosmith. That's their version of the song. But there's usually somebody else who writes the song. And so we license the rights to the written stuff and what they call the sync rights in the industry. And with that, we can go re-record the music. Right?
Are you still allowed to use the name of the musician that made it popular?
Yeah, you have to say that it's like that musician or something like that. You can't actually use the musician's name.
But you were paying royalties to the person who actually made the music and the song.
That is correct, yeah.
So they were more willing to work with you guys.
That's right.
That's amazing. Can you share? I heard a story about like Sex Pistols and stuff like that. Can you share more about these like epic stars?
Yeah, it was really interesting. Like I said, fascinating to work with the industry. The Sex Pistols, in their case, I believe that was Guitar Hero 3 when we first had them in the game. We got them to license their songs. They actually did a super cool concert for us in LA. It was awesome. There was maybe 200 people in the Whiskey Club. It's a famous place in LA.
Whiskey A Go Go.
Yeah, Whiskey A Go Go. Sorry,
Okay,
yeah, Whiskey A Go Go. Yeah, Whiskey A Go Go. Sorry. And
I used to go there like every weekend.
Yeah.
When I was on Hollywood. So
yeah. It was a lot of fun.
Room, yeah.
It was a lot of fun. So they actually performed there as part of a promotional thing that we did. When we licensed the music and they approved it, they actually went back and tried to find their master's music. And you would think these things are like locked up in vaults, right? Like, that they must be so well protected. The reality is a lot of times they're in the back of a closet in, a label or some studio somewhere, right? And so some of them get lost. So in their case, they lost some of the music. So they actually came back and re-recorded some of the music for us, which was really cool.
So, but like, I need to ask though, like, are you a true like metal fan? Was that before like the games, or how did that work out? Did you adapt?
I was not a metal fan, but I did like rock and roll. It was a lot of fun. And then just over time, working with the music and working with the industry, I just got a chance to learn a lot more about the music and the artists and the stories. And anytime you get a chance to learn all about that, I think it just, makes things a lot more fun and relevant. So, yeah, over the course of working on the games.
What's your favorite song?
My favorite song, actually, one of the first songs that we use, and it always sticks in my mind, in Guitar Hero, before we launched the game, we had a test version of the game, a prototype, and we used Dope Nose by Weezer. And I'm a huge Weezer fan. So we're able to use, some really interesting, cool stuff early on, and had some fun with the music.
When did you realize that there was such an amazing, product fit? Like, you got all these, really people who are diehard into music and people who are diehard into games, and you made it really fun for everyone, like a drinking game with friends, or like when did that happen?
We started to see signs pretty early on, even in development of the game, before Guitar Hero 1 was released, that it seemed to be a party game. And in fact, we learned about what we call party games through other music games like Dance Dance Revolution, which was popular at the time. It was this dance simulation game, and they had other music games in Japan. And we just saw that a lot of times when people had parties, they would just break these games out, right? People weren't breaking out like Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, or, different games, different genres of games. But music games, that was the kind of thing that everybody tended to bring out. And so we just noticed that they were a lot of fun, and a lot of people were interested in playing those games. And so we saw that really early on, and as we launched the game, that's one of the things we really focused on, was how do we push this out as a party game? Because that was how we were going to get virality. People talk about it. You go over to your friend's house, to their party. All of a sudden, 20 people are exposed to the game. We had contests where people could send us pictures, and people sent us some awesome pictures of them, like all dressed up, full costume at home, right? Jumping off the couch and just doing all kinds of stuff.
Dressed up as the rock,
like rock stars, like rock stars, wigs and the whole the outfits and the whole thing. And they were playing the game, and we were just like, okay, that's kind of a thing.
That's really high in fan factor. Was that the highest point, or did you have people that just had to get to the highest level right away, and were like, I can't stop playing,
we had a lot of people early days just addicted to the game. It was one of those games where we had people tell us, after work, they would come home and sit down for half an hour, and just relax to, a couple songs. People told us, they would throw Guitar Hero parties, and, so that was how a lot more people got exposed to that. And so it was great to just see how many different people were playing the game. We got a letter from a woman. She was a middle-aged woman, and she wrote us a letter because she said she quit smoking because of Guitar Hero. She said every time she got the urge to smoke, she would play Guitar Hero.
I quit
That's how
trying
she
to
quit.
be like a real musician. So what are the pros of cons of making this ideal computer game to other people out there who are, game makers, developers?
Pros and cons meaning like what's
What does
the
it take or what does it not take? Don't do.
Yeah, I would say, every time I talk about making games, the one thing that you really need to figure out is just this fundamental core mechanic that people love. And most great games, there's some kind of fundamental mechanic that people enjoy, right? Whether it's, team battle, Guitar Hero, it just happened to be this core idea around music and this puzzle game. And so there's a lot of different genres of games and just figuring out for your game, what is that core mechanic? And our core mechanic just happened to be that it was awesome to listen to the music and the game could make you feel like you were a rock star. Right? People would pick up the guitar and, they would forget that it's a plastic guitar and that it's not real. And the music would start blasting. And people would just get engrossed in playing the game and it just makes you feel like you really knew how to play guitar because it was fun and it helped you engage with the music. And so that was the kind of thing that we did was we looked at that one core mechanic and then we just built everything around that. Because if you don't build your product around a core mechanic, then I joke it's like putting lipstick on a pig, right? It's just never going to be great no matter what you try.
That's a good line that I will remember. Maybe we can go back to the days. I've heard so many stories of that you kind of bootstrap this with your own cash, like living on a 2-week cash span and stuff like that. And actually working with your brother, I've always wondering how did that relationship and that motivation, and maybe share also some stories of how, this crazy startup idea or that came to life.
Yeah, I mentioned a little bit earlier that we started from a very different place where we ultimately ended up, like most startups do. We actually started the company as an online game rental service. So think Netflix in the early days when they were renting video games by mail. We were renting movies by mail, DVDs. We were renting video games by mail. We started at about the same time Netflix did, and we thought, that was just an area that nobody was tackling, right? You had your old school video stores that were Blockbusters of the world, right? That were renting movies, renting games, but nobody else was really focused on the game consumer. So that's how we got into the business. And I always say that that's kind of on the periphery of the game industry. It's not really in the heart of the game industry, right? Which is really publishing and developing of games, software. We were kind of on the distribution side. One of the games we were renting at the time was Dance Dance Revolution. Mm-hmm. And customers were asking us, hey, you rent the game, but do you sell or rent the dance pads? Because we need the dance pad accessory to play the game. And for months, we were like, no, we don't do anything with hardware. We just rent video games online, right? We're not a hardware company. So we decided, when the internet bubble burst in 2000, which was shortly after we started the company and raised money, so, okay, we got to start generating revenue. So people are asking for these dance pads. It's not what we do, but let's sell them the dance pads.
Were you part of designing these early guitar versions as well?
Of the accessories,
okay.
yeah. In the early versions, we actually didn't do any design ourselves. We just went out and bought some dance pads from a local distributor, and we just resold them and marketed them online. That's literally how we got started with dance pads. After about 5 or 6 months of reselling other people's dance pads, we were a direct-to-consumer company, so we got a lot of feedback from customers, and we also hired a whole bunch of interns who liked the game and really enjoyed the game. So we got a whole bunch of ideas there as well, and we decided, well, let's go make our own dance pad. So my brother, Charles, who has a little bit of experience at that time in international manufacturing, went to China. Open up the Yellow Pages. Okay,
I've done that too.
For.
I went to China to we had a product line with another friend.
Yeah.
I was the one that went to China, found the factories and all that stuff. So I know the process can be quite
daunting.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially back then.
Yeah.
When we started in the early 2000s, it was a very different time. It's still very daunting now, but it was also a very different time back then. So So all of a sudden we start manufacturing our own dance pads, RedOctane dance pads. And I'd say the one difference that happened for us, and one of the reasons I feel like, we were able to become successful, was that rather than we were going to sell our dance pads for $30, the ones that we made, which is the same price as all the other third parties. Our cost of goods was $8, so margins were pretty good. At the last minute, we decided, let's sell these for $50. And in retail, you can take the price down, but it's very difficult to take the price up. Also, sometimes when you have a high price, it can signal quality. And we felt like we had a better product, so we said, well, let's just start higher. If it doesn't work, we can always drop the price. So we launched the product at $50. Immediately, it caught on. People who were fans of the game, thought we had made the best dance pad that was out there. So we built this little following among that core group, and then just kind of kept expanding it from there. We were very lucky because our margins were, especially for hardware, were quite good.
But you started with like no real investment. This is really just you and your brother kind of together.
When we first started the company, we actually raised some friends and family money, to get things going. But we never we were never able to raise VC money, through the life of the company.
So do you, is it, what do you say to other people? Like, is it good to start a business with like such a close family member? Like, I've always had this, like, like friends, partners. How does that work? How is your guys' relationship?
I think for us, it turned out to be really lucky, and it did work out for us. Or at least we're still talking to each other, right? But it wasn't easy. So the one thing that, we grew up fighting with each other, right? And so the one thing that was very easy for us when we were sitting in a meeting in the office was, if I didn't like what he said, I just would start yelling at him, right? Well, that's stupid. That's a terrible idea, right? No, we're not going to do that. And he would do the same thing to me. And it took us a couple of years to really learn, and it took an employee of ours to actually tell us and spell it out for us. They said, hey, Kai and Charles, when you guys start arguing, just in the office like that, we paralyzed. We don't know what to do. So sometimes, they say it's like mommy and daddy are fighting again. We just don't know who to listen to, right?
Can't choose sides, exactly,
right.
Exactly.
So it became very difficult for them. So we decided, okay, we got to stop fighting in front of everybody, and let's just go, take that all behind the scenes, behind closed doors, and yell at each other in there until we're okay with it, and then, then tell people what we're talking about or what we're thinking.
But cool, but I think those early days, there were times where you guys had to take out personal loans and mortgages. So I think people want to know, like, what is the motivation to keep going? Is it belief in the project, in yourselves, or what is it that helps, like, keeps you guys, entrepreneurs going?
I think for us, it was a belief in, of course, what we were doing. We had no idea, how big the company would get, but we were interested in, building a big company, even though at the beginning it was difficult. I think it's just this belief that we have to succeed, right? Our first round, we took friends and family money, and it wasn't like, okay, sorry, nobody wanted to go back and tell them, hey, we lost your money. And for us, this is what we love to do, and we wanted to see it succeed. So, for us, that was the only road. What was like
success for you? Was it like, what was the point where you were like, we've succeeded? Was it, when you were acquired, or you had this moment where like you saw somebody, in Mongolia playing your game? I'm sorry.
I was literally on Easter Island.
Right.
Maybe like 5 years after the first Guitar Hero launched, and there was somebody wearing a Guitar Hero t-shirt, walking around the street there. It was actually quite a funny moment.
That's like the sign for you.
Yeah,
wow.
Easter Island. I was like, wow, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. I think for us, one of the first points was we couldn't, after the first friends and family round, we couldn't raise VC money. We tried. We went up and down Sand Hill Road. We lived in Silicon Valley.
Yeah,
we lived there. We grew up there. Tried to talk to people about this idea, right? Whether when we started as online game rentals, we didn't bother even going out when we were doing accessories because that was hardware, and in Silicon Valley, and nobody back then, especially, nobody liked hardware, so we didn't even bother. But once we started to get into publishing again, that's when we decided, well, let's go out and try to raise money. And before Guitar Hero launched, it was impossible to raise money because what's your business plan? Well, we're in video games. We don't like video games. VCs don't like video game space, right? It changed a little bit over time now, but back then they didn't like video games. It's a hits-driven business. We don't invest in video games. Second thing is, oh, you're doing music games. Well, we don't understand what's a music game, right? Like that just wasn't a popular thing. It's certainly not mass market. And third thing was, oh, you do hardware, right? It's like, oh yeah, that's just terrible. So we sort of hit every no checkbox there was. So we couldn't raise money. Once we launched Guitar Hero and people could see the data and could see how there might be a lot of interest in the game itself, that was the first time that we were able to actually get real VC interest. And I thought, after 6 years of trying to raise money and not being able to raise money and finally having people say, okay, I'm willing to give you a term sheet and raise money, that was probably the first time that I felt like, it was that we were starting to really do well, right? Really get on the hockey stick. I would say when the company was acquired, certainly that was a happy day. So, that was a good validation of, hey, we had built a real business that a big company like Activision actually wanted to buy.
Maybe for people who are also, want to build a successful company, what advice would you give on like selling your company or that rep?
Well, I think number one, most entrepreneurs, I think, don't really think about when they want to exit. And we had a great piece of advice from one of our advisors. He's a longtime startup entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. He's done very successful. One of his first things he told us was, as we even had a chance to go through the process, he said, Kai, Charles, you got to pick a number, right? Start thinking about that. Back then, it was, let's pick a number. Well, pick a number. Pick what number? Okay, well, pick a number meaning, think about what price you might want to sell the company at, right? And everybody has different interests and desires and values and lifestyle. Maybe some people are totally happy with selling a company for, $5 million and, it's enough money to maybe not retire in Silicon Valley, but certainly enough to do whatever you want for the rest of your life, right? Maybe some people want to have, $100 million in a private jet. Maybe some people are just, hey, I want to be a billionaire, right? You have no idea. But most people don't even think about, those things. And so I think that that question, pick a number, just helps you at least start to think about that, right? Like, what are we shooting for here, right? Everybody is a startup entrepreneur. Most people are just like, oh, I love what I'm doing, very passionate about it. I want to build a big company and everybody's going to make a lot of money. Right? But you don't really, again, come back to some of those basic fundamental things. The other thing I think it forces us to do...
It's probably a kind of a good sign if someone's like, pick this magical number
right.
where you're set for life, or
yeah.
I don't know, where you can, build your second company. That's like pretty good place to be at.
It's a good place to be at for sure, right? I don't think anybody complains in that place. The other thing I thought that was very important about that is that as we went through the acquisition process, because we had at least put some thought into it, right? We weren't like thinking about this all night, but you just put some thought. And ultimately what happened was when the offer came and it hit our number, then what I think it does is it creates financial discipline. Just like financial managers, people who manage money professionally, and they're buying stocks, let's say, they usually have an entry price and an exit price, right? And they kind of makes you think about it ahead of time. So I'm going to buy here and I'm going to sell when it hits here. And what I think that helps you start to do is it starts to put more business rigor into the thinking, and it starts to take the emotion out, or tries to take the emotion out. Because I've seen so many times where people buying stocks is, again, a more common thing, but you buy a stock and it goes up and you hold on to it and you're like, oh my God, I can't sell it.
I think also because it's like your baby, like you've birthed this, right? So that's why they ask you to like, okay, what are you okay with? And then we work from there. Otherwise it's just like, oh, but I could, we could have Guitar Hero 10 or so. Right.
Yeah. How far can we ride this, right? And so for us, I think, those were a couple of the important things to think about that really helped us through that process.
Okay, so, you're kind of like music, music, you do like the 25-year anniversary. Like, is there something like that coming out? Are people playing it in Taiwan, or where can we like get it again? Or
it's still sold in stores. It is. I've seen it in Taiwan before. Activision, who acquired our company, has not released a game since 2015. So I'm not sure if they have plans to actually release another version of the game. I would suspect that at some point they probably will. I was pretty surprised when I saw. Literally, it's been so long, but I saw just the other day. NPD, which is this reporting group that reports on video game sales, said that they put a list of the top 10 games of that decade when Guitar Hero 1 first launched, and it was the #1 selling game of the decade, right? And
of course, yeah, congrats.
it was, yeah, thanks. And it was just something that I never thought, never even really thought that we were close or that was interesting.
You kind of like, you mass adopted people who, rock stars, like I was saying before. Maybe there'll be maybe we can work on together like an EDM spin.
Oh,
because how many people want to be DJs
right,
now, right?
Right.
And we're in Taiwan, which is a great place for hardware, isn't it?
We did actually release a DJ Hero. At the time, it was the #1 selling IP, first time IP, meaning new IP. It was the #1 selling game. It did 150 million in its first year, actually, in sales. But for a company like Activision and for a franchise like Guitar Hero was, unfortunately, as big as that number was, it just wasn't big enough to decide to keep it going. But it was a very cool game.
Yeah, so you do have this game of the decade, game of the century, kind of non-game game. Best-selling game ever, but you've started all of these other companies after that, and we're still talking about this game that was 10 years ago. It's still relevant today. I've heard your story a million times. How does it feel when you want to do the next startup and the next startup? Are you like, I'm tired of that, I want to talk about this and this and that, or is it hard to have that benchmark? Or
I don't know that I'll ever get tired of talking about it. I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with the company, right? If it was something where I felt along the way I just wasn't enjoying it anymore, or at that time, right? Then I might feel differently today, this many years later after the game's been released. But I thought it was a lot of fun working on the games. I had a great experience, really enjoyed it. So I don't mind talking about it all. But I certainly, enjoy talking about a lot of the other new stuff that I've worked on as well.
Do people see you and they're like, "Oh, can you do that thing?" Or
Yeah.
So yeah, please give us a recap of these different startups that you've started and what you're doing now with 886, which I'm also quite familiar with, but maybe you can share.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to talk about 886 because that's actually, here in Taiwan where I have been here since last June. So I've been in Taiwan now for 10 months since COVID hit. So it's particularly relevant. When we first got here, my family first got here in June, we were originally just planning to stay for summer vacation. We'd had 3 months of shelter in place in the Bay Area. We're like, okay, if everything is going to stay closed, great time to get out of here, go back to Taiwan. So we come back about once a year. So when we first came back, it was just going to be summer vacation with this now silly sort of expectation that school might reopen in the fall, right? Or at the end of summer, right? And so once we started figuring out in August when schools were at that time looking to reopen and they decided, okay, no, we're not reopening school, right? Things were still very bad. That's when I decided, okay, I can't just sit here on vacation indefinitely. I got to do something. And so that's when the idea of 886 Studios started to be formed. It was really about, as startup entrepreneurs, I had so many friends here. How do we help Taiwan? And the way that we feel like we can best help Taiwan is leverage the experience that we've had starting companies. All of us are from Silicon Valley. We've all started companies, we've all exited companies, and so we've been lucky enough to have that experience. So the idea of 886 Studios is a venture studio. We want to help build companies in Taiwan. So similar to an accelerator, but different. An accelerator will bring in teams that already have ideas, probably have built a product, in some cases even have sales or revenue. In the case of 886 Studios, we start earlier than that. We just bring in super smart people and say, hey, if you're interested in doing startups and you're motivated and you're ready to go, come on in and let's chat about ideas and let's brainstorm and let's throw stuff against the wall. And, if we feel like there's an interesting idea, let's test it, let's build a prototype. And at some point, if it makes sense, we can spin it out into its own company.
You're the first person that I've talked to about it. Was this your idea that you manifested, or you were convinced by someone, or who's involved? How did it come to?
Yeah, I would say that the seed of the idea was me, but there were several people, that helped think through this in the early days. We have a partnership group of 12 sort of previous founders. Myself and my brother Charles, who started RedOctane, a lot of them were, friends of mine, and so they're from the game industry, which was where I spent most of my time. Kevin Cho, who co-founded Kabam, Chris Huang, who co-founded Playdom, Kevin Lin, who co-founded Twitch, Joe Hay, who co-founded Orbit Baby, which is a baby products company, Phil and Tim Chen, who started companies both in the U.S. and here in Taiwan. So it's a pretty big group of people, again, who've all had experience, and our goal again is let's bring in some super smart people, and we have a group of pretty diverse experiences, and we can not only as founders, but also of our own companies, but as investors now, angel investors in other companies. And let's take that experience and let's help, younger entrepreneurs come up and shape ideas and ultimately shape companies.
Do you feel that being like there's a lot of new communities that I've seen that are like, groups of exited founders that are turning into VC or funds. Do you feel that having that experience is the best knowledge to as going through the process to offer to these young people, and where do you think you could help the most?
I feel like we've done both starting companies, and all of us have also invested in companies, and I feel like it's great to see both sides of the coin, right? As a founder, you're always out begging for money, right? As a VC, they actually do beg for money too, but they're also investing, money as well, right? So you get to see both sides of the coin. Like, what does it look like from the founder side, and then what does it look like from a VC side? And so trying to being able to understand both sides is really, help other startups with, okay, this might be a founder's view, but this is a potential investor's view, right, of the idea or the product or the business. The other thing that I think, all of us have been able to sort of bring to the table is just a diversity of backgrounds. So again, as founders and investors, but also from different areas. And so we've seen different things from hardware, software, enterprise, just a lot of different areas that we hope to be able to bring experience to. And ultimately, the idea is to create a recycling where if we can start companies that hopefully are successful and exit, then those companies and those people who are hopefully teams still in Taiwan, some will be in whatever markets they choose to go to, right, to target. But if they're building teams in Taiwan, then let's get wide equity distribution. Let's get people stock. And so then if those companies are successful and exit, then they become investors or they become founders of companies themselves, right? And I think that's a big hallmark of what happens in great startup ecosystems. That's how it really grew in Silicon Valley. So for 886, I think that's a big part of the philosophy. That's, again, how we feel like we can help Taiwan.
Okay, so you're kind of saying help Taiwan and, help the ecosystem. Are you talking about specifically Taiwan or globally? What kind of areas are you looking at? Maybe you can, for people who are interested, and what kind of talent?
It's quite simple. We don't have specific areas that we look into, but most of us are consumer. Most of us have been in games. There's a couple of people partners that are super interested in crypto and have been doing crypto and blockchain. Chris Huang has a blockchain company
I
called
was like,
Thundercore.
that's my thing. What do you mean? You're not into blockchain.
But me personally, I only know about blockchain.
You don't come to my crypto events.
But Chris, his company is Thundercore, and
Yeah, I
he's
know
been doing that for
Thundercore.
4 years, right? And Phil Chen has also been doing blockchain. He's got a blockchain
That's
fund,
true, that's
actually.
true, that's
yeah.
true.
Blockchain and crypto
HTC
fund.
phone.
Yeah,
Blockchain phone.
yeah, exactly. So he spent a lot of time in the space. So we actually do look at a few of these areas, but again, most of them tend to fall more on the consumer side.
But more like Taiwanese people, or can anyone apply, or
Yep.
like is it somebody who, like, there's a lot of these things where we don't care about school degrees. You just have to show us passion, or what is the ideal? What is the spark that you look for, or like what do you think?
Yeah, I think we're pretty open. So we have people right now that we're working with and collaborating with, founders, right? What we consider will be co-founders of these companies that get spun out, are from outside of Taiwan, and some of them are from inside Taiwan. And so we feel like a mix is what we would try to build, where people who come from, let's say, Silicon Valley and who might be back here now but want to do startups can mix with local entrepreneurs, and they can share ideas with each other, right? See what the local strengths are. Taiwan's very strong in hardware and software development, right? Technical sides.
So do you feel like on the coding technical side, like it's really just like who can do the work and who has the ideas, but maybe on a market fit, do you feel that what's holding these Taiwanese startups from having more adaptation to a global market?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on that. I would say the first thing that I tend to see is that most startups that are in Taiwan tend to want to start with the Taiwan market. And it's very natural. It's your home market. You kind of feel like, oh, we'll start here, and then it's a stepping stone to our next market, whether we want to go to Southeast Asia, China, US or Europe, right? And the thing that I always say is, don't start in Taiwan. That's what we tell our founders here, right? Don't start in Taiwan, because the market is too small here, but no market is easy to penetrate. So even though the market, even if it's a local market and you feel like, oh, we can do something quick and get started here, it's never quick and it's never easy, right? There's just some basic overhead that needs to be laid down before you can enter into any market. And so what I see is that a lot of Taiwanese startups here end up starting here and then kind of getting bogged down here a little bit, right? Just because it's not easy. So even if it is a small market. And so then that extends the time that it takes to enter into other markets. But more importantly, what I've also experienced is that outside investors then just tend to put a label on Taiwanese startups and say, well, they don't really know how to go outside of Taiwan, right? So to me, I feel like you need to start from outside Taiwan. Don't even bother think about starting in Taiwan. It's too much work. It's too much overhead, even if it's a easy market. But you want to target the big markets first.
But do you think this is directly like a Taiwan-U.S. play, or is there room in Southeast Asia? Is language a barrier, or what's the main barrier?
The main barrier into getting into any market is just always going to be that basic overhead traction of, okay, there's going to be a language thing, right? I got to set up sales, marketing, and distribution. I got to hire people, right? If it's a service, how's the best way to acquire users? Every country's a little bit different. What are they searching for in terms of your product? Like, what do they really enjoy about your product, right? And I think you need to figure out all of that stuff. And so no matter what market you go into, I just think it's just not easy, right? So if you're going to do something that's hard, you might as well go after the big markets, right? Rather than start with the small markets.
Interesting. So do you spend a lot of like your time getting your hands dirty with these projects? Is it like a set of the same people on like 4 or 5 different ideas, and then once like one has, you focus on more? Or can you give us some examples of what you're into right now?
Yeah. So one of the things that we do is we try to match make founders who are very passionate about ideas and match them to these ideas, so ultimately we can spin them out as companies, right? So that we want to make sure that they're passionate about the idea versus we're passionate about the 886 Studios is passionate about the idea, and the these co-founders end up not really enjoying it.
The best thing is to make it fun, and then you forget that it's work, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the ultimate goal, right? Make it fun. And so we're actually sort of incubating a few ideas right now. NFTs, of course, we're working on something in the NFT space, like everybody else in the tech world. And we have a few ideas there. One of the things that we're really interested in is Cameo for Asia. There's no real Cameo for Asia. So Cameo is this service that allows celebrities to record like a short clip of themselves. A lot of people do buy one of these for their friends for their birthday. So Floyd Mayweather's on Cameo, and so if you want him to record a video, he'll do that for you, right?
Is it in an NFT form, or?
Right now it's not. So that is a possibility as well. But we feel like Asia has a really good sort of following when it comes to celebrities, perhaps even more so than like the U.S. does. And so we think that's a really interesting idea. To how do we bring something like that here to Asia? The other thing that we're looking at, and this is a totally different thing, is exercise for seniors.
Oh, wow.
So no one actually really focuses on seniors for exercise, but there's a huge need for that, right? Seniors who want to stay healthy, insurance companies who want to make sure they stay healthy, and there's some interesting examples that we've seen, but
I used
still
to
a big
volunteer
opportunity.
at like a senior home, so I'm wondering. I think the major step is getting them into the whole digital. Still nowadays, right? So
Right.
Is this easy to use, or is it like a physical thing, like a bicycle, or is it like a software?
So right now we're looking at more of a physical thing, and we're sort of thinking about a couple different ideas. One of them is similar to like a bike, right, where people are just going to be much more familiar with how that works versus if it's purely digital. Okay, maybe that's a little too challenging. So we're thinking about, but it will have a digital component to it, right? So we're thinking about various different ideas, but there's kind of a range of stuff.
That's really cool. An interesting place. Taiwan has like a really large population of very active like seniors or things. It's a very senior friendly place to get started.
And a lot of exercise equipment gets manufactured here in Taiwan, and so it feels like one of those ideas that if we can get something to work, that we can leverage a lot of the strengths that Taiwan has.
Interesting. I've been doing a lot of research on this whole new like gaming metaverses and owning property and having actual real cash value put into these games. I think it's such a crazy thing that all these younger people are into. What are your thoughts on that, and how do you see like gaming kind of expand?
It feels like right now that gaming is probably what's going to push this concept of the metaverse, right? This virtual universe or virtual worlds that people live in. There was a time when you had products like Habbo Hotel and Second Life, which was a while ago, that pushed these virtual worlds, but not really, in the same way that games have been able to do it, right? And they were very popular back then, but games just has a much more natural, stronger, a stronger attraction, because the one thing that I've always said about great games, like a Roblox or like a Minecraft, the ones that are really pushing toward this metaverse, Fortnite, right, that are pushing toward this metaverse, or Epic with Fortnite, is that they're basically what I describe them as social networks. And the context of the game just happens to be it's a game, right? Versus, the context could be anything else where people want to gather. It could be, let's go to a restaurant and have dinner together, right? That's one context. Let's go grab coffee at a coffee shop. Let's go play tennis. It's just a context for doing something together. And great games like these, it's just a context for people to get together, right? It just happens to be playing a game.
So do you think there's going to be more like AR where we're kind of in a game and we're hanging out? Is that kind of how you see also with the NFTs, or?
I think games historically, maybe the way that we think about them, may not be 100% the way that evolves. Certainly that will be part of it. But I think people just think of these as they're not like just a virtual world. They're places where people gather, where you go have fun, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And the context, a lot of those people, the context will actually be a specific game. Like, I love playing this game. But I think there will be more entertainment experiences than just purely like I'm walking around in this virtual world and, I can visit these virtual properties and stuff like that. I think that is not going to have as much long-term engagement, from my experience, as something more like a game where there's a fun context that we gather around.
You need the fun factor and the with friends factor.
Yeah, that's what keeps people coming back, right? It's like, oh, that's why, people go to restaurants. They enjoy eating out. It's fun. You're with your friends, right? Or you may enjoy going to bars, or you may enjoy going to, again, play a sport with your friends. It's just something you enjoy doing together that you come back over and over to.
So I think these ideas continue to be like recycled in things that you touch. And you're still, like you're saying with the NFTs, you're still talking about the celebrity factor that's also going to bring people together on like one different aspect or the other, right? But I'm wondering now, like with the NFTs and with all of these celebrities getting involved, do you see that there's like going to be a huge need for all of these different platforms, or how can you stick out, and do you see it kind of evolving in the long term, or is it a short term thing? How does it get to where we're at this part where we're hanging out and all this technology is happening?
I think where we end up will be a lot different from where we are today. I think this is really still just the beginning. This is like, internet 0.1 was, right? 20 years ago or 25 years ago when it first got started. I think the seeds of the ideas of what will people enjoy are starting to be built now. But what gets built and what are the experiences that win, and, who's going to be the winner, right? Who's going to have the most people? I think that will be very different.
Yeah, because I'm also seeing this, like, it's really hard to get everyone on the same page. For example, if you have a Taiwanese celebrity like Vanessa,
yeah,
you have like people in the crypto space, you have DeFi collectors, like these whales that, have a lot of value in their collections, but then you just have fans, right? That just want to like be a part of the next cool thing.
Right.
How does it all connect?
Yeah, I don't have an answer yet to how it's all going to connect, but there will be some way, and I don't know how long it'll be, right? But I think a lot of these things are going to intersect.
Sounds very fun, and I hope you do push forward on that. So I see you as being like this all-around, like 24/7 entrepreneur, and now that you have this experience, you want to, like, I'm understanding with 886, you want to give back and grow other founders so that they can kind of like not only succeed but also give back and continue the cycle of like Taiwan and the U.S. Maybe you can kind of feel what else are you passionate about? Is it like you want to have roots here in Taiwan and help the country grow, or just entrepreneurs grow, or maybe tell me a bit more about your future goals and your passion?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of areas where I'm spending my time. One is education, so looking at giving back in education, and supporting certain programs. One of which, for example, at the university that I went to, which is UC Berkeley, there's a program called MET, Management, Entrepreneurship, and Technology. And it's an undergraduate program where they're accepted as a dual major in engineering and business. And usually you study one or the other, right? So you kind of come out as a more business person, or you come out as a tech person or as an engineer. And one of the reasons I think this program is so fantastic is when I went to college, I actually majored in computer science, but I wanted to go back and get my MBA. And so ultimately I never went back to get my MBA. Because I went to the startup world, but I think it's a fantastic program, and so that's one of the things in education, for example, that I really enjoy supporting.
I think nowadays people are like, fuck school, like do an entrepreneur program.
Yeah.
Maybe do you believe in that also? Maybe you want to do like an entrepreneur program, like what Dapper Heroes or something like that. Is that kind of what you see? And also, you have such an interesting background. You grew up in Mountain View. You went to Berkeley. Yeah. What do you think what's the route that you would tell entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think that, one of the things that I was lucky enough to have had the experience, I didn't get a major in business in undergrad, but I did get a minor, and I took all the business classes that were interesting. So I did get a background in that. I would say that, for people that are interested in startups and, what I've learned in Silicon Valley is like getting that blend of business and engineering is great. I think those really early stage programs are fantastic and needed, but I feel like the pool of those people are too small. Like, yes, there are a lot of great people who can do it at that super young age, but I think for most people, for the broader population, I think that's just too young, right? I think there's a much bigger population. If you went to, university and you graduated and you got that experience, right? Especially if you want to be a technology business leader over time, right? So I love the idea, and I think those work. I think there's a broader impact, if you can have the bigger program.
Or maybe that's what you're doing with 886. You're sort of like shaping these people that you see potential in and giving them skills that they can do these like entrepreneur tasks. Because I think a lot of people in Taiwan that went to school, they don't really have like that experience.
Right. I think certainly the educational system in Taiwan relative to, what I've seen in Silicon Valley just doesn't give them that same kind of experience, right? There's some schools, which is what makes, I think, Silicon Valley so strong. There's some schools there which definitely focus on engineering and entrepreneurship. And I think getting people more of that here is going to help. So we can do our small part with 886 Studios. We call it, for us trying to elevate Taiwan, right? That's the way. Let's educate or help these founders, right? Shortcut the process for them. And if they're successful, then they can recycle that knowledge back over time.
Yeah, exactly. Like I know a bunch of people when I first moved to Taipei who were in college and got really into crypto. Yeah. And now I know a bunch of people that have children that are, including yourself, that are looking to get into internships or looking to get into this more entrepreneurial like context. So maybe that's something that you can also offer. Did you always think that, that you wanted to come back to Taiwan, or when you were like growing up in Mountain View, did you see yourself as a future entrepreneur?
I didn't see myself as a future entrepreneur when I was young. Not in the way that maybe some people thought, like, I want to do some great tech thing, right? I knew I wanted to go in business. I just didn't know what. And business for me was, let me focus on getting back, eventually going and get my MBA, which I never did. But that was kind of the first path. And then I thought, okay, after that, I'll figure out what exactly I wanted to do. Once Internet 1.0 hit, it was like, wow, everybody's, not going back to school and people are building these internet companies and this is super cool. So let's figure out if there's cool stuff to do. So that's really, I think, what drew me a little bit more into the tech side. As far as Taiwan, it's definitely something that we've thought about, that, at some point we want to come back to Taiwan and spend, more time here. This time was unplanned. It was 10 months, we've been here, unplanned because of COVID. But I think, maybe in the next couple of years, we'll have a more defined plan of, what do we want to do in Taiwan? How do we want to stay? And,
Yeah, I think because you didn't have like the normal raise with your company, as a VC and investor, you don't want to just hand out, checks to these young startups. What's like one thing that you really have to go through and learn on your own, or tips for these startup guys, like so that they stick through it?
I think you just have to really have a passion and just this like being a cockroach, right? You just can't die. You just have to keep fighting through whatever it is. And it's not easy. And, especially if you're here in Taiwan, it is hard to do startups, right? I mean, little simple things, and luckily, they're simplifying some of these now because I think enough people like us have complained about it. But just registering a company and just like opening bank accounts in Taiwan, like to do business, was like it's a really hard process. It's not easy. In the U.S., I could incorporate a company in like 3 days for $99, right? So we have to, I think, here kind of be able to push past a lot of those things. And so entrepreneurs have it a lot rougher. But I think, if this is passion for you and thinking about doing it, you just got to have that. You just got to make sure you have that, inner drive and inner desire.
So people that you meet, I know you're very kind and you're very approachable and you're always offering to give, advice and tips. People that meet you, is your word of advice is like, okay, if you want to do a startup, don't ask for money, join our program. What's a minimum barrier? You're accepting new grads with an idea, people with 5 years coding experience. How can they, what's the first steps to get to this program?
Yeah, we actually don't have a particular bar there, so we'll accept younger, even if they're super talented and they're haven't finished university, that would be okay too, right? Back to this sort of young entrepreneurs program, graduates or if you've got experience, that's okay. We're just looking for, again, super passionate, super smart people who know that they want to do a startup, right?
And you're also from beginning to end. Like, there's not a point where they grow out of it. It's like a full...
That's right.
Interesting. Yeah. So are you going to be in Taiwan, spend your time back and forth now, or what's the plans for you?
So right now, the current plan is to be here till middle to end of summer. So another 3 or 4 months or so. And then back to the U.S., most likely kind of going back and forth. Hopefully with vaccines, quarantine periods will be loosened. So,
I feel like I'm brainstorming for you, so a lot through this. Wouldn't it be cool if San Francisco had a swap where Taiwanese people could go hang out and do a quarter there? Is that something you've thought of, or? It's
definitely something we've thought of, or how we can get some folks from the U.S. or other parts of the world to come here, right?
Are you helping with the gold card? Do you have a gold card?
I do, yeah. I came back on the gold card. No, I am not. I did come back on the gold card, though. And, it's a lot of those things. We're, working with a bunch of folks who are actually here in Taiwan on the gold card program, gold visa. And so I think that's a great opportunity to, bring talent back. And if they want to work on startups 886 as an example, we'd be happy to work with them, because at some point, if we have a great idea, there's a great opportunity to spin that out. Yeah. And if they go back to wherever they're from, if it's US or Silicon Valley.
I totally get it. It's not just injecting money into Taiwan. It's not just, hiring a few people and bringing them back to Circle and helping this sort of space grow here.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
That's the goal.
I like it. I just wrote your whole mission statement.
Yeah, exactly.
You're welcome. I'm kidding. You guys have a website yet? I really don't know.
We do. 886studios.com. I think for most people, who are, I say as a former entrepreneur, right? If you're interested in entrepreneurship, just immerse yourself in it. Get out there, meet with people, learn more about it. I see sometimes that people here in Taiwan tend to kind of think a lot about things themselves first, whereas in Silicon Valley, if you're interested in it, people just start going out and start meeting and talking to as many people as you can. So for people that are interested in entrepreneurship here, get out, start talking to people, network, meet as many people as you can, and that's the way you get ideas.
I was at a network and I brought some Taiwanese friends, and they were like, "Oh, what is networking?" It's where you actually go to a place to meet new people. That's a new term for us. So I think with good kind of resources and these kind of things, I think it's really something that it can actually physically grow from here, and that's super exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much for being here, Kai. You're a cool guy.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Okay.